Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to this Shingo Institute webinar. My name is Ken Snyder and I am your host today. I am the Executive Director of the Shingo Institute. It is my honor to introduce our guest, Nancy Nouaimeh. She is the founder and managing director of Excellium, a Shingo licensed affiliate. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Nancy. And she is going to talk about Align to Excel, why alignment is critical for sustainable results. Nancy?
Thank you very much, Ken. It's my pleasure to be here with you today, presenting this webinar for our attendees here. And without further introduction, let me start with the presentation. So in today's agenda presentation, we're going to be talking a little bit about the alignment in the Peloton. And I chose that. I'll explain to you in a while why I chose that. It's a very important, I think, system that helps those groups of cyclists excel. And that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit. I'm going to share with you two stories of misalignments, which I have experienced working with two different companies and how we managed to move them from that misalignment to somewhere where they achieved great results. I'm going to touch a little bit on the enterprise alignment principles in the Shingo model and some takeaways for you from this session today. I hope you'll enjoy the session, and I tried to put it a little bit in a fun way. So I think all of us have had the opportunities to watch to attend classical musical concerts or to see marching bands in festivals. And I think there's a lot of synergy that we see and wonderful coordination between those musicians in these orchestras. But lately, in the past weekend, I had the chance to observe a very interesting system for me. It was a musician playing on the Irish Union bagpipe. I do hope I pronounce it right. In Gaelic, it's the uilleann. And it was a great synergy you see between that individual, the musician, and the instrument he's playing. And it's all about his elbows, about the movement of his fingers, about how he releases the air on his leg. And all this made a great system. And I was observing that and then going back to the orchestra and how they work together, all these musicians, the effort they put together, and how wonderful is it to see the success and the enjoyment we get from listening to their music playing all together, and what synergy that brings in. And that took me to the second thing which I wanted to present to you here today is the Peloton. This is my son. I'm very proud to share with you this photo here. He's 16. He's going to turn 17 in December. He's been cycling for the past, I think, 7-8 years. And having a cyclist at home, I have three, in fact, my daughter and my husband too, but mostly my son, got me into that world of cyclists. And we watched the Tour de France in summertime. And I see the endurance and how much effort is put by each one of these cyclists and into the team. But I was mostly intrigued by two articles I read lately about the social performance within the Peloton and how much important is the contribution of each individual into that success of the Peloton. And I read deeply into that, and I can connect it easily with what I'm going to be presenting to you here about enterprise alignment. And having to see those examples, I think it's very important when we relate them to how we conduct work in organizations. So I just wanted to introduce to you briefly here without just to know a little bit about how the Peloton work. So if you look at those groups of people racing together, you see that everyone knows his role very well. Otherwise, we'd have a lot of incidents of safety incidents, right? Accidents and people falling. We see that quite often, I think, more than we should be seeing, but it's not that frequent compared to the amount of energy that's put there and how the interaction between people is and the risk they put themselves in. So in the Peloton, everyone knows his role. Everyone knows the rules and the systems they need to follow. Otherwise, they will see more catastrophic accidents happening. They know the rules of the roads. They know the rules within the group. They know how they need to be working together to avoid these incidents. And they also know the road and the goals that they are pursuing. Each one of them know where is he going, what he needs to do, and how to achieve that. They also execute their own defined roles very efficiently. That's what contributes to their success. The Peloton works collectively. You will see them working. It's really fascinating to see how they move on the roads, is to see how they stay together. They know how to move with each other, and they have to follow each other. But also at the same time, they are able to do their own roles individually. One important thing about the peloton is that the leader changes. If for the people who follow this kind of sports, they know that the leader change at certain stages of the race. And with that, still the work continues. With still that they reach to the finish line of the race and they manage to adapt to the changes in leadership. And in the peloton, there are different roles. There's the team leader, there's the team captain, who's the one who is an experienced cyclist who plays a management role. The leader is the strongest person in the peloton, and this is the person that everyone follows and try to bring to the finish line and to put him on the podium, regardless of their own interest. We have the climbers, we have the sprinters, they have different expertise, they have different competence, but all of them work towards one goal. For the peloton also, we see that there's a lot of trust in the leader, a lot of trust in the members. All of them work together, all of them, there's no competition among each other. They are really working towards one goal. Again, it's their defined roles. I think that makes it very clear for them how they can contribute to the success of the peloton. Each one of them has his own role, but they know also how they can contribute to the overall success of the peloton. I think I see this very important in a group is knowing the strengths of our own strengths and the strengths of others, and knowing also the weaknesses. So we focus on the strengths, we focus on bringing everybody forward, and we focus also on making sure that everybody puts his strengths to the better use of in a good way that contributes to the success of the team itself. And the strengths, when it's known, we can leverage on that. We can put people working together in different groups. We can make sure that that strength is used to the best interest of the group. There's a clear direction for the peloton. I will share with you at the end some takeaways. They know clearly where they are heading. They know who's the leader, they know who's the captain, they know how everyone is going to contribute in a way or at a certain stage of the peloton. Now, of course, they need to adjust to those changes in the circumstances, the context, but each one of them knows which direction he needs to take. And I think it's very important to know and to see that positive attitude and make sure that it's really recognized in the peloton. Like I said earlier, we see that they contribute without having the competition between each other. They are working towards one goal, and that's what makes it very important for them to bring that leader of their own to the podium, and that's what makes their strengths. Now, the peloton success, if I want to really bring it into these four different elements, it really reflects what we can see in organization, in successful organization, and unaligned organization. And when we talk about enterprise alignment, we need to see those elements that help the organization have that alignment and have everyone understand his role in the organization and work with the group towards achieving the objectives of the organization. So for the peloton, I think it's important to know that they have their own objectives. They have yearly objectives that makes that group work towards one direction. They set their goals, they set what they want to head, and each one of them will work towards these objectives. They adjust their tactics, but still, as a group, they focus together on achieving those objectives. When it comes to the group of the peloton itself, the cyclists, they travel as an integrated and cohesive unit. If you see them, really, it's amazing to see the flow of cyclists on the road. They have the same speed, they have the same position, they have everything, that shows that cohesive and that synergy among each other. And they adjust that based on the riders, they adjust that on the individual riders, they adjust that is moving and what's the game that the leader is making, and what are the steps that he's following. And this is something that they learn by having certain systems in place. They have the right training, they have the right strategies, and also they have certain systems which are very strong in the peloton, and I'll be talking about this next. And from the most important thing, I think, in the peloton is something which I found really very interesting. We usually focus on the rising stars in an organization, right? We have the group of the best performance, we have the high performance, we just give them recognition all the time. We focus on what they're doing and where to put them and what position to give them. But in the peloton, it's I think the importance is given to the low performance, same as the high performance. And that's what's really interesting. If you look at the photo here, the first person is the leader. At the end, you have those who are slower, right? The people who are less performance, and we have less chances, I think, to see them as leaders. But all of them are pushing forward to get that leader to where he should go. And in the peloton, the low performance, the focus on the low performance is very obvious, because those are the people who are going to push everybody also forward the same way that the leader is doing that. If the low performance, they stay far behind, I think that's going to slow the peloton. And if they push harder, if they try to improve that performance of theirs, they can push everyone forward. And the leader is on the top. He's trying hard all the time to make sure that everyone follows, and if he speeds, the people behind him are going to speed. Now, there's a lot of dynamics. I'm not going to go into that about how they protect each other from the wind and these kind of things. But for me, the most important in the peloton is that the focus is on everyone, is on the high performance and on the low performance. And that's what makes it very synergetic in a peloton. Now, other than the performance, I think the thing which is very ironic in the peloton is there's a silent and effective communication. We don't hear them talking, we don't see them talking, but they really communicate very well. They learn this communication through the system they put in place before, through the strategy, through the objectives, through the alignment they do together before the races, and when they are working together outside those special moments they share together. So the silent communication is a result of a great alignment that is done through the different work that's done in the peloton. Now, these 4 elements are very important: having direction, having clear objectives, and everybody's following, having a cohesive unit, having a synergy among the team members, and having everyone understanding their role and how they contribute together, focusing on everyone. And this goes back to training and development and making sure that we have systems that help people achieve their full potential. And for me, communication is critical in all this. So from the peloton, I just want to move back a little bit to the enterprise alignment in the Shingo model, and how is it important and why is it important to have systems in place to help us get into good alignment among people, among the systems, among the tools and the objectives they want to achieve. And I wanted to share with you this saying from Peter Singh here, saying business and human endeavors are systems. We tend to focus on snapshots of isolated parts of the system and wonder why our deepest problems never get solved. And this is what inspired me to give you these 2 examples of misalignments that I had encountered working with different organizations before. So the first one is about departmental silos. And all this is just to give you kind of an eye-opener for the things that you need to look at when you want to improve the way work is happening in your organization, to improve your results and to make sure that you reduce the waste and the way you're working. We had to work with an organization where we had different objectives for quality, health and safety, and environment. The team working on these objectives were kind of different people from the organization, but they had common times when they worked together. But each one of them has different objectives. We had the champions in the field who needed to achieve these objectives, but they were given to them in a disconnected way. So what happened in that organization, that we had competition for resources and support. People had to achieve different objectives, but they were not really understanding how these objectives are connected. They were not looking at achieving them together. And this created a kind of misalignment between the different teams. We saw waste because they were using different resources and trying to achieve the same similar objectives. They were not meeting their objectives because they couldn't really tell where are these connected and what are the things they needed to focus on. The champions, which they gave these objectives to, were disconnected, disengaged, and we saw low quality and safety levels. So we didn't see cohesion initially, and we didn't see clarity on the objectives. We didn't see people knowing what these objectives are and what other people's objectives are, and we're not working together on achieving these objectives. So the systems we tried to put in place to align this group was have a strategy deployment where the objectives from the organization were cascaded down into the department levels and to these disciplines, quality, health and safety, and environment, in a way where it was visible to everyone. We focused a lot on communicating these objectives to people. We focused on to them and to the other in the organization. So we gave visibility on what these objectives are. The key thing was integrated management systems, and we have that system where everyone we brought everyone into the same platform. We had an integrated management systems. The areas were common to everyone: leadership, resources, the reviews, all these the internal audits were all put into one system, and we kept the separate disciplines like quality, health and safety, and those special elements to those disciplines separate. We created cross-functional teams, and we created committees to look at those common elements and how to achieve those objectives. So we had a lot of cross-functional teams and committees working in the organization to bring everybody in the same on the same platform. Also, one of the great things I think which we managed to do for that group is giving them specific job duties, which were approved, signed, and posted. And I agree, I put here signed because it was an agreement on the things that they needed to do individually, an agreement on their objectives, an agreement on each one's responsibilities, and how to make sure that this is completed at the end based on the deadlines they put all together in place. So it was an agreement. They all together decided that this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. The other example here is also about planning and design. So this facility, they had designed a new facility. Unfortunately, what they did is that it wasn't done by one or two separate departments. They looked at it, they wanted to bring new products line, but they didn't involve everyone in the organization and everyone required. So what happened? They had to buy machinery which was not used. They had delays in launching new product lines. They required additional storage for the things they didn't really use because they were not the things that the team required. There was a lack of planning, lack of proper design. And finally, they were not able to meet their client satisfaction. So for this company, the things which made a big difference was have a planning process in place, cross-functional planning process in place involving all stakeholders required, client relationship management to get the client's requirement early in the process, procurement committee which aligned all the stakeholders related to material selection and material quality, regular management review meetings which helped everyone align on these new projects. And I go back to communication, which is critical. So we had very good channels of communication to bring all this information to all individuals. These are things which helped enterprise alignment and helped sustainability of results. After these systems were put in place, we could see that people were working better. They had the problems that they faced initially were not happening again. The behaviors of people were very clear, what's expected from each one of them, especially when we work on the individual levels, on the team levels, and we made it clear for them what are the things that they need to do. Now, just moving quickly, I think many of you might be familiar with the Shingo model. I just want to relate all what I said to the three principles under the enterprise alignment: creating value for the customer, create constancy of purpose, and think systemically. And when we know all of us that vision, mission are very important to give direction, but there's other systems that help people align in an organization, and making people think systemically and understand how their role integrates with the other, how their contribution to the success of the team, how does it happen, and where does this need to happen, requires some systems. And this is when we follow the principles, these three principles of excellence. I think it helps organization to build those systems. It helps you to focus your efforts on what needs to be done to make sure that everyone in the organization speaks the same language, understand what they're doing, and relate to what the company is doing and needs to achieve. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but there's a lot of systems. I spoke to you about a few of them. There's a lot of enterprise alignment systems that could be put in place depending on what the situation and what you want to try to achieve and what behavior you want to exhibit from your team. Before coming to the end of this presentation, I just wanted to share with you some key takeaways. I hope, Ken, we are still in the time. So the key takeaways, alignment is something we build in an organization. It's something we focus on. It's something that requires time. I was reading some articles and it's important, I think, what was reflected in those that you need to empower managers to work on systems to support alignment. You cannot just expect that to happen. You need to give time to your managers to spend on building the systems, and we saw some examples today on building those systems that creates alignment within the organization. It's something that is overlooked sometimes. It's something where we don't give it enough importance, but I think this is the basis for creating good results and sustaining those results. Systemic thinking, when principles, systems, and tools are integrated into a perfect system, we see that everyone in the organization thinks systemically. I'm not going to go into the definition here of thinking systemically, but it's important for everyone in the organization to understand how they fit within that system and how their work is going to contribute to that. Constancy of purpose in the examples I've shared, everyone knows and agrees and can explain how she contributes to the success of the organization. We see this in the peloton. In the peloton, they have an understanding between each other that this is their role and this is how they're going to contribute to take their leader up to the podium. So this is very important in any group. Value for all, it's important to consider all concerned when we focus on the value. It's important to look at the stakeholders. It's important to look at, we talk a lot about customers. For me, internal customers are important. The group you're working with, how you're helping them achieve their success in the same way you achieve yours is very important because we all contribute finally to the same organization. And with this, I think if companies put those good systems in place, they're definitely going to have a good continuous improvement process and sustainable results. And this is what we discovered with those entities we worked with. With this, I would like to thank you all for listening. I do hope that this brought you a different perspective on how we look at alignment in organizations. And I think, Ken, we can move to the question session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. We have a question from Marco. On this particular company, and I think he is referring to the second case study that you gave, he asked the question, which were the 3 biggest challenges to go forward with this big transformation?
One of the challenges was the alignment of the team who was in charge of the planning process because they had that system in place and their system was not working well, and convincing them initially that they needed to change was the I think the most challenging thing for us. But once we aligned them with and we put a good planning process in place, systematic process in place, and they followed that made a big changes for the next projects.
Good. A question from Catalina. How do you suggest to start? How to determine which system is required first?
Okay, thank you, Catalina, for your question. For me, I think it's important to see what is the issue you're trying to sort out, what are the most pressing pain points you have, and you address those ones first. So you look at what are the things you need to put in place. But definitely you need a more systematic approach if you want to implement enterprise, if you want to achieve enterprise alignment, is you need to look at the entire things you're doing. And that's why the principles will help to see where are the gaps you are having. And you look at the behaviors and see what are the behaviors that you want to change. And then you start with those ones. So it's a whole thing. It's a whole, I think, project you need to put in place when you want to change. But for me, if you look at quick wins, you can look at where the areas that your pain point is and then focus on those ones. I do hope I answered your question, Catalina.
We don't have any open questions right now. So let me ask a question. Have you ever seen places where people are making improvements that are local to their place of work, but don't help or sometimes maybe even harm the whole organization?
Yes, absolutely, Ken. And this is my first example where people were just focusing on certain areas and they didn't. So they put the resources in one area and they deprived other areas from those resources. But when they put them together, they got better results because initially we had to replicate the efforts, we had to replicate the use of resources. We had a lot of waste also because one solution in one place was not matching the need of the team in the other place and another department. So when we started looking at those common areas, this is when we made a big difference. But before that, we had a lot of waste, we had a lot of issues and we couldn't really achieve objectives because they were conflicting. The work that was happening by the team was conflicting at a point. So when we showed them how things align and how things are interrelated and how they impact each other, this is when we made a big difference in that work.
Thank you. Haven't had any other questions pop up. If anybody out there has a question, oh, here's one from Jonathan. Regarding competition and the potential for this to undermine a project, this seems to be such a focus in business. How do you manage that?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I think I have a live example going on for the time being. Just for competition, I think what helps reducing competition is if you have good systems in place, and I go back to systems here, to recognize efforts of people, systems that give visibility on what's happening and who's better, I mean, where the work is the good work is happening. We don't want to really look at fame and shame, but if you have systems that recognize the effort of people, that recognize the contribution, that recognize the results and outcomes, if you have good performance management systems, these helps reduce the competition. So you eliminate those negative elements from your culture. So I think for the competition is important to look at systems that recognize the efforts of people, that and at the same time help people who are not able to perform well, and give them the opportunities to develop further so they can contribute better. So you need to have the system on both ways: a system where protect the good performance, a system that develops those who requires to develop themselves more, to contribute better to the organization.
Well, once again, don't have another question, but let me ask another question then. Can you give us an example of an organization that you've worked with that has used a common purpose, that when it says create constancy of purpose, they have created that constancy of purpose and then they have used it to bring alignment?
I think I've seen it in different organizations, Ken, and it is when you have that purpose, you have your mission and vision very well laid down, and you use it in different communication. You use it in your meetings. You display it for people, and you tell people how do they align to that one. I see that strongly in the healthcare sector usually, and I work in an organization also like in the food industry. So everything was about passion for food, and everything was around food, how they develop their people to provide good services to their customers, or produce good products, or even working on their CSR activities, which aligned with their purpose, which is passion for food. So when you have a good, strong, I think, purpose, and you explain it to your people, and you have your activities around that, that stands out strongly in the organization, and then everybody can align to it.
Great. We don't have any additional questions, and I think that was a very nice presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to put this together and help us learn more about a Peloton. And I think we're recording this, and so it's available for you to view again for those who have joined. Oh, we have one final question here from Chuck. Let's take that one because we still have time. Chuck asks, with given it time to build, are there specific leading measures or metrics that tell you the build is heading in the right direction?
Depends on what measurement you have in place. I would say if you're talking about specifically about behaviors, definitely there are measures to see if if your people are changing their behaviors, but also in terms of operational KPIs, and if you're targeting certain areas, you can also have some measures. It's a wide question, but if, for example, if for achieving objectives, for example, you can look at that and see if you are heading towards the right direction. Some companies, they go to a high level of reporting on KPIs where they have completion score, for example, for their objectives. And if that score is is increasing, then it tells you that you are moving towards the right direction. In terms of KPIs too, you can have certain measures there to tell you how is the behavior of your people shifting. So there are certain measures to put in place if you want to measure that improvement, definitely. And you set your baseline and you keep looking at how things are moving.
Thank you. One more question. Jim asks, what are some of the best measures for understanding changes in behavior?
Ken, do you want to take that?
So within the Shingo Institute, we've developed the concept of a KBI, or a key behavioral indicator. And a good example of that, or a simple one to understand, is rather than measuring the KPI of people getting hurt after people get hurt, measure the activities that people undertake to prevent accidents from happening so that nobody ever gets hurt. And you can measure safety catches and actions taken to prevent those safety catches from turning into an accident that harms somebody. And that's true of just about everything when it comes to alignment as well. Are people, you could track the, we've seen some organizations that on their suggestion system, they have people write out a simple explanation of how does this tie to a specific goal, or how does that the organization has set, or how does it tie to the purpose that has been articulated that you're creating that constancy of purpose around. And when an organization does that, they bring those activities together and make them aligned. And so tracking the behaviors is a better way of driving that alignment than just looking at the KPIs, the results, the things that happen after the fact. Does that help, Nancy?
Absolutely. And I think safety is a great example always. Yes.
It always is. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. Well done today. A little bit of applause. I hope the others felt saw the value in what you brought. And thank you so much for teaching us about the Peloton and how it relates to organizational alignment and how that can drive alignment, can drive excellence.
Thank you so much, Ken. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.